Hello, my name's Ashley from With Jack, and what I'm going to do is answer three questions that I've been asked on the freelance subreddit and answer them from the perspective of somebody who has experience in insurance and helping freelancers with these types of problems on an almost daily basis, but also having been a freelancer back in the day, I have that experience as well. So the first question is, people here love contracts, but how does one actually help you? In theory, they're great, but in practice, if a client stiffs you on the last benchmark payment, or worse, what can you realistically do with your contract? I'm not saying not to get a contract, but if my client screws me over, there's nothing really that I can do. And I think that legal advice and representation is probably going to cost as much, if not more, than what I'd hoped to recover. So I like this question. It's a good question. Contracts, how do they help you? Oh, they help you on so many different levels. The first thing that kind of springs to mind for me is that in most cases, if you have a little bit of a conflict with your client, the contract helps to diffuse the situation because you can simply refer to it to remind your client of what they agreed to. So, for example, here they're talking about payment terms. What if my client stiffs me over payment terms? You should be able to gently remind your client, oh, well, actually, this is the payment terms that you agreed to in black and white. Or if the situation's a bit more severe, then you don't have to be so gentle. You can simply highlight to a client that they are in fact in breach of contract if they don't pay you. So I think that's the first thing, is that in most cases you can diffuse situations simply by referring to your contract to remind the client of what they agreed to in black and white, because it's very difficult for people to argue against what they agreed to when it's there in black and white. The second way that it can help you is you can pepper lots of clauses throughout your contract to help protect you throughout the duration of the project. And one of those things is in your contract, we talk about it a lot on With Jack's blog, is adding a pause clause to your contract. And I'll probably butcher the description of what this is, but basically, if a client doesn't provide you with the deliverables that you need to do your job, whether that's content, like images, copy, or whether it's signing off and work at a certain milestone, or whether it's payment, adhering to payment milestones, then you can pause work on that project and will resume work once the client returns to you with the deliverables, but you'll have to reschedule them back into your current workload based on whatever availability you have, and that could be weeks away, that could be months away. So that really incentivizes clients to stay on track. But irrespective of what clauses we're talking about here, the point is you can put clauses into your contract to help protect you throughout the duration of the project. Now, if things do go a little bit further, and here they're talking about legal advice and representation, which is going to cost as much, if not more, that's where your insurance steps into action, because contracts are so good for laying the foundation of what duties are to be expected of both parties, but insurance is what steps into action when those duties come into question. So in this case, with sort of payment disputes and needing that little bit of legal advice, you would use your legal expenses insurance. First port of call is using the legal advice helpline. You don't have to pay to speak to a legal expert. That's all included in the cost of your monthly premium. Or you can also use the debt recovery service that's included with that product. And then if things are really bad and there's legal threats, getting involved or a client trying to recover compensation, you'd use your professional indemnity insurance. But I'm going off on a tangent. Point is, your contract can help diffuse most situations. It can help protect you throughout the duration of the project. But if things do go that little bit further, that's why you should have insurance. Next question. How to protect yourself from the client not paying you and how to solve the problem if it happens. 7 months ago, I started freelancing. I haven't had any issues with non-payment, but some of the freelancers I know have. I wish to protect myself for the future. So I'd appreciate if you could share your similar experience if you've had it, and how did you solve the risk of not being paid? I like this question because they haven't waited until the problem has happened, as so many freelancers do, to reach out and get advice. They're actually saying, I want to know what I can do right now to protect myself from this happening. But I am going to give quite a pessimistic answer, unfortunately. I personally think that every freelancer, if you freelance for long enough, I just realized that I thought I'd be making eye contact with you, but I've been looking at the light instead of the camera, so sorry. If you've been freelancing for long enough, I think every freelancer will encounter issues with non-payment, unfortunately. I don't think there's necessarily too much you can do about that, but there are, of course, things that you can have in place to limit the damage if it happens, and that is having the correct payment milestones in place. So, for example, and again, we're kind of going back full circle to the contract thing, having it in your contract that the deposit, once that's been paid, if it's a 40% upfront payment, is non-refundable. And that deposit is what books out your time in the calendar to work on this project. And that means that if you get to the week that the project's beginning and for whatever reason it doesn't go ahead, at least you have retained a percentage of the cash flow that you thought you would have coming in at that one time. Now, I'm actually not the best person to give advice on payment terms because I was a freelance wedding photographer, and to be honest, the way that I approached pricing was really simple. I'd get my deposit, and that was the client booking in that date for their wedding, and then I would invoice the remaining amount about a month before their wedding was due, and never had any issues there because people wanted their photographer to turn up on their wedding day. So I'm not the best person to give advice around payment terms. So I would refer you to Work Notes, and they do have a freelance pricing guide. It does cost money. It's £13. Should be money well spent from what I've heard. But if you don't want to drop that £13, then definitely dig into their articles because they have a lot of blog posts about pricing. Really useful information there. Now, if worst case scenario, your client does not pay you, we still have options. We still have options. The one thing to do if you have insurance is use your debt recovery service that's included with your legal expenses insurance. And that means that a solicitor will chase your payment on your behalf. And we find this is a really successful means of recovering the money because you're involving a third party, it's a legal entity, and clients get a little bit of a fright. So there is that option. We also have spoken to customers that have went down the small claims court route. What you can do is send your client a letter before action. And that is you saying, if you don't pay this balance within X amount of days, then we will go through a small claims court. And so far, and you can get access to this template through your legal expenses insurance. So far, we've not seen a single case where that's happened go to small claims court because the client's just paid up. But obviously don't send that unless you are willing to go through the possibility of going through a small claims court. And then also, my dog is scratching at my leg right now. Indy, I'm kind of busy. Also, lost my train of thought. Yes, I would also like to normalize the whole debt recovery services that are available out there. I've mentioned one that's included with your insurance, but if you don't have insurance or if that can't help you, then it's definitely worth checking out third parties. And I know that the name is kind of taboo, debt recovery, but really all they're doing is taking that problem away from you of you having to chase payment when you've got other work on, you've got other things to be focusing on, and they handle that for you. So you do have options. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but you do have options. Final question. Undercharged, a quote on a creative project. I'm seeking advice on a conundrum that I'm facing. Okay, Indy, if you're going to, do you want to sit on my knee then? No, you just want to scratch my leg. Come on. Come on. There we go. No, okay. Conundrum I'm facing in a 2D animation job. I've been commissioned to create a pilot episode for a web series, and the client asked for a 60-second animation. It's now become 2 minutes long, and I'm currently in a conversation with my client about reconsidering the initial quote because the project's doubled in size. Am I out of line to be expecting a fair pay for the extra work that I have to do, even though the initial quote doesn't specify any overtime conditions? Absolutely not. You should 100% be getting paid for the work that you've done. Now, to kind of avoid things getting to this stage where there's a bit of ambiguity around, we haven't had that conversation, so what do I do? When you're sending your quote to a client, you have to be specific about what that includes. So, for example, I'm charging you £1,000. In exchange, you get 60-second animation. You get it delivered in this format, and this includes 3 rounds of revisions. Boom. Anything outside of that would have to be charged at an additional rate. Well, Indy, I did offer for you to sit on my knee, and you said no. So that's how to avoid this situation, because you're having those conversations before the project has went underway, which means there's no nasty surprises if something like this happens. Now, I obviously get the impression that that wasn't specified prior to the project beginning. So I would say that that's still okay. You should absolutely send your client the quote for the 120-second animation. I don't even think you have to have that conversation. You don't have to go, oh, I know the quote's worked out more expensive. Is that okay? Just send them the quote. If they query why it's more expensive than what you initially quoted them for, that's when you would say, oh, because that quote was for 60 seconds. The project has doubled in length, more time, more resources from me, which means more money. And I bet in 99% of situations, the client would just go, oh yeah, okay, fair enough, and pay. If they don't, then I would, in this situation where they haven't had those conversations, they haven't really done things spot on, I would just use that as a lesson learned, and that going into the next project that when you're delivering a quote, you are specifying what that is for, and that anything outside of this has to be charged at an additional rate, and the time scale of the project has to be adjusted accordingly as well. So I hope that was helpful. Like I said, I'm Ashley at With Jack. You can check us out at withjack.co.uk. We help with situations similar to this, similar to kind of these problems, but that have escalated to perhaps legal issues. And what we do is kind of remove the pain of having to find the right lawyer and pay expensive upfront fees, because that's included in your insurance for a monthly premium of between £15 to £20, depending on what cover you choose. So check us out at withjack.co.uk, and I'll be back again to do something similar in the not too distant future. Let me know if this was helpful. Bye.